Story 1. Phantom of the Atlantic. Sarah's coffee cup shattered against the cruise ship deck. The man standing by the rail turned around slowly. That face, those eyes, the same crooked smile that had kissed her goodbye 3 years ago. But Michael was dead. She had buried him herself. The Atlantic wind whipped through her hair as passengers stepped around the broken ceramic. The man was gone. Just empty deck space where he had been standing. Sarah's hands shook as she gripped the metal railing. This was supposed to be her healing trip. 7 ports along the eastern seaboard, from Boston to Miami. A chance to finally move on from the accident that took Michael away from her. But there he was, again. She had first seen him in Boston Harbor, standing in the crowd at Faneuil Hall. Same navy jacket, same way of standing with his weight on his left foot. When she called out his name, he vanished into the tourist mass. Then in Portland, Maine, walking along the old port district. She followed him for 6 blocks. He stayed exactly 50 feet ahead, never looking back, never changing pace, just walking with that familiar stride she knew better than her own heartbeat. Now here, day 3 of the cruise. Standing on her ship, Sarah pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. She scrolled to Michael's contact. Still there after all this time. She pressed call. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Of course, it wasn't dead men done to have phone service. She forced herself to walk back to her cabin. Deck 7, room 742. The hallway stretched endlessly ahead. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Her keycard beeped as she unlocked the door. Inside, she collapsed on the bed. The room spun slightly. Too much wine at dinner. Too little sleep since Boston. Her grief counselor had warned her about this. Phantom sightings. The mind playing tricks during the healing process. But this felt different. Real. Solid. The way he moved. The way he held his shoulders. No hallucination could capture those details. Sarah opened her laptop. Cruise ship internet was terrible, but she managed to load Facebook. She searched for Michael's profile. Still active. Still showing his last post from March 15th, 3 years ago. Had dinner with my beautiful wife. Life is good. Posted 6 hours before the drunk driver ran the red light. She scrolled through old photos. Their wedding in Cape Cod. Vacation in Key West. His smile staring back at her from the screen. The same smile she had seen on deck. A knock at her door made her jump. Housekeeping. Sarah closed the laptop. Come in. A small woman entered with fresh towels. Her name tag read Maria. You okay, miss? You look pale. Just tired. Sarah managed a weak smile. Long day. Maria began replacing towels in the bathroom. This your first cruise? Yes. Beautiful ship. Very safe. Not like some of the old stories. Sarah sat up. What old stories? Maria glanced around nervously. Nothing, miss. Just old sailor tales. Ships that sail these routes. Sometimes they carry more than just passengers. What do you mean? My grandfather, he worked merchant ships. Boston to Miami run. He always said the Atlantic remembers. Especially around this time of year. Sarah felt ice in her veins. What time of year? March. When the waters are still cold. When the currents change. He said souls get caught between ports sometimes. Looking for something. Someone. The room felt smaller. The walls closer. Sarah's breathing became shallow. Did your grandfather ever see anything? Maria finished with the towels. She looked directly at Sarah for the first time. He saw a man once. Same man, different ships. Always traveling the same route. Always looking for someone. My grandfather said the man had been searching for 20 years. After Maria left, Sarah couldn't sit still. She grabbed her jacket and headed to the ship's library. If something was happening, there had to be records, stories, something to explain what she was experiencing. The library was nearly empty. Just an elderly man reading a newspaper and a teenage girl with headphones. Sarah found the local history section. Books about maritime disasters, ghost ships, unexplained phenomena along the eastern seaboard. One book caught her attention. Mysteries of the Atlantic Coast. She flipped through pages about lighthouse keepers, missing vessels, and strange sightings. Then she found it. Chapter 12, The Eternal Passenger. Multiple witnesses reported seeing the same man on various ships traveling the Boston to Miami route. Always alone, always searching. The sightings began in 1987 when Thomas McKenna, age 34, fell overboard during a storm. His body was never recovered. According to the account, McKenna had been traveling to meet his wife after a business trip. The ship's manifest showed he had been scheduled to disembark in Miami on March 18th. March 18th. Tomorrow. Sarah's vision blurred. She read the description. Dark hair, navy jacket, crooked smile. 5'10", wedding ring on left hand. Just like Michael. But Michael had died in a car accident. Not at sea, This didn't make sense. She photographed the page with her phone and kept reading. The sightings always occurred in March. Always involved someone who had recently lost a spouse. Always ended the same way. The witness would follow the figure to the ship, Israel. The figure would point toward the water. Then both the figure and the witness would disappear. Sarah's hands went numb. The book fell to the floor. She ran from the library, through corridors that seemed to stretch forever, past confused passengers and concerned crew members, up to deck 12, the highest outdoor level. The sun was setting. Orange light painted the Atlantic waters. Sarah scanned the deck frantically. There, by the stern rail, the figure in the navy jacket. This time, he was looking directly at her. Sarah approached slowly. Each step felt like walking through thick water. The figure didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there with Michael, his face and Michael's smile. 20 feet away, she stopped. "You, not Michael?" The figure tilted its head, the same gesture Michael used when he was thinking. Michael died on Interstate 95, not on some ship. The figure raised its hand, pointed toward the water, then pointed at her. Sarah followed his gaze. In the churning wake behind the ship, she saw something impossible. Another figure, standing on the water's surface, waving. It was Michael, the real Michael, still wearing the clothes from the night he died. His face was pale, waterlogged, but it was definitely him. He was mouthing words she couldn't hear over the wind. Sarah leaned forward, straining to understand. The figure beside her grabbed her arm. Its touch was ice cold, solid, real. "You, read Thomas McKenna," she whispered. "You've been looking for your wife for 37 years. The figure nodded, still gripping her arm. "But she is not on this ship. She is not on any ship." Thomas McKenna, his face twisted with desperate confusion. His grip tightened. Sarah looked back at the water. Michael was still there, still mouthing the same words. Finally, she understood. "Don, come." Michael was warning her, not calling her. Sarah tried to pull free, but Thomas' grip was like a steel cable. He was pulling her toward the rail, toward the water where his wife was supposed to be waiting. "She is not there," Sarah said firmly. "Your wife," I said, "in the water. She is wherever people go when they die peacefully, in their beds, surrounded by love." Thomas stopped pulling. His face showed the first crack of understanding in 40 years. "You've been looking in the wrong place. And you've been taking other people with you." The grip on her arm loosened slightly. "Let me go, Thomas. Let both of us go." For a moment that felt like hours, they stood frozen. The ship cut through dark waters. The sun disappeared below the horizon. Stars began to appear overhead. Thomas McKenna looked out at the water one final time. Michael was gone. The wake was empty, just foam and darkness. Thomas turned back to Sarah. For the first time, his expression showed peace. He smiled. Not Michael's crooked grin, but something gentler, more tired. He released her arm. Thomas McKenna walked to the rail. He climbed over in one fluid motion. No splash, no sound, just empty space where he had been standing. Sarah gripped the rail with both hands. Her knees buckled. She slid to the deck, shaking uncontrollably. A crew member found her 20 minutes later. "Hypothermia," they said. "Shock. Too much time in the cold wind." They wrapped her in blankets, gave her hot chocolate, asked gentle questions about what had happened. Sarah told them she had been looking at the stars, must have stayed too long, got disoriented. The next morning, the ship docked in Miami. Sarah disembarked with the other passengers. Normal people with normal lives and normal problems. At baggage claim, she checked her phone. 7 missed calls from her sister. 3 voicemails from work. The regular demands of the living world. She was scrolling through emails when she noticed the man standing by the car rental counter. Dark hair, navy jacket, wedding ring. But this wasn't Thomas McKenna. This was someone new, someone different. He was scanning the crowd like he was looking for someone specific. Sarah's blood turned to ice water. The man's eyes found hers across the terminal. He smiled. A different smile. Not Michael. Not Thomas. This smile belonged to someone else entirely. Someone who had also been searching the Atlantic routes for someone he lost. Sarah ran toward the exit. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Steady, patient, following at exactly 50 feet. Just like in Boston, just like in Portland, the automatic doors opened into Miami sunshine. Sarah kept running, past taxi stands and shuttle buses, into a crowd of tourists and business travelers. She didn't look back, but she could feel him back there, walking with his own familiar stride, following his own pattern of grief and obsession. The Atlantic had let Thomas McKenna go, but nature abhors a vacuum. and there are always more widows taking healing cruises along the eastern seaboard. Sarah reached her rental car with shaking hands. She fumbled with the keys, dropped them twice, finally got the door open. As she drove away from the port, she checked her rearview mirror. The man in the navy jacket was standing in the parking lot. Not moving, not following, just watching her go with patient, endless eyes. Sarah drove north on Interstate 95, the same road where Michael had died. She rolled down the windows and let the Florida air wash over her. In her purse, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Thank you. Just those 2 words. Sarah smiled through her tears. Thomas McKenna had finally found his peace. After 40 years of searching, he had learned to let go. She deleted the message and kept driving. In her rearview mirror, Miami faded into distance. The Atlantic disappeared behind palm trees and strip malls. But sometimes, when the light hit the mirror just right, she thought she could see a figure in a navy jacket. Still standing by the water, still waiting for the next ship to arrive, still searching for someone who was never really lost. The road stretched ahead toward home, toward life, toward healing that might actually stick this time. Sarah turned up the radio and pressed harder on the accelerator. Behind her, the Phantom of the Atlantic watched another ship pull into port. There were always more passengers arriving, always more people running from grief, always more chances to find what he was looking for. Story 2. Vanishing phone mystery. Lisa's phone was moving through the ship without her. Deck by deck, room by room, like someone was carrying it on a deliberate tour. She stared at the Find My Device app on her laptop. The blue dot had been traveling for 3 hours now, through corridors she had never seen, into areas marked as crew only. But she had left her phone at Jimmy's bar on Paradise Island. She remembered setting it on the counter to pay for her rum runner. Remembered the bartender's crooked smile when she asked about the local ghost stories. Now her phone was somehow back on the cruise ship, moving at walking pace through Deck 12. Lisa grabbed her room key and headed for the elevator. She needed to catch whoever had her phone before they accessed her banking apps. Her photos, her private messages with Derek back in Tampa. The elevator climbed slowly. Too slowly. Lisa watched the Find My Device tracker on her laptop screen. The blue dot was moving toward the ship's bow, getting farther away with each passing second. Deck 12 was mostly storage areas and crew quarters. Lisa had never been up here before. The hallways were narrower, dimmer. The carpet was industrial gray instead of the luxury burgundy from the passenger decks. Lisa followed the tracker down a long corridor, past doors marked electrical and maintenance. The blue dot was stationary now, inside a room labeled Communication Center. Lisa knocked on the door. No answer. She tried the handle. Locked. Through the small window, she could see banks of computer equipment. Monitors displaying ship data, navigation charts, and sitting on a desk in the center of the room was her pink iPhone case. But nobody was inside. Lisa knocked harder. Still no response. She pulled out her laptop and checked the tracker again. The blue dot showed her phone was definitely in that room. So how had it gotten there? Lisa found a crew member mopping the hallway. His name tag read Carlos. Excuse me, I think someone found my phone and brought it to the communication center. Can you help me get it back? Carlos looked nervous. He glanced at the communication center door and shook his head. Nobody goes in there without authorization. Very restricted area. But I can see my phone through the window. It's right there on the desk. Carlos looked through the window. His face went pale. Miss, there is no phone in there. Lisa looked again. The desk was empty, but her laptop tracker still showed the phone in that exact location. That is impossible. The GPS says it's right there. Carlos backed away from the door. Miss, I think you should go back to your room. This deck is not for passengers. Lisa watched Carlos hurry away with his mop bucket. Something was wrong with this whole situation. Her phone couldn't be simultaneously visible and invisible in the same room. Unless someone was messing with her head. Lisa took the elevator back to Deck 8. Her room was at the end of a long hallway. As she walked, she noticed other passengers looking at her strangely, whispering to each other, pointing. Did they know about her phone somehow? Lisa reached her room and locked the door behind her. She opened her laptop and checked the tracker again. The blue dot was moving, back down toward the lower decks, heading for the engine room. Lisa's hands started shaking. She had been standing in that communication center for 20 minutes. If someone had taken her phone from that room, she would have seen them leave. But the tracker didn't lie. Her phone was definitely moving through the ship. Lisa called the guest services desk from her room phone. This is Lisa Martinez in room 842. Someone stole my phone on Paradise Island and somehow brought it onto the ship. I need security help tracking it down. The woman on the phone sounded confused. According to our records, you never left the ship today. You've been aboard since we departed Fort Lauderdale. Lisa's vision blurred. That is impossible. I spent 4 hours on Paradise Island. I have receipts from Jimmy Esbar. We never docked at Paradise Island. Our next port of call is St. Thomas tomorrow morning. The phone line went dead. Lisa ran to her balcony and looked out at the ocean. Dark water stretched to the horizon. No islands anywhere. No sign of the tropical paradise where she had spent the afternoon drinking rum runners and listening to ghost stories. But she had been there. She remembered everything. The white sand beach, the reggae music, the bartender who told her about the vanishing passengers. Lisa checked her laptop again. The blue dot was now in the ship's laundry room, moving in small circles like someone was pacing. Lisa grabbed her room key and headed back out. She needed to find her phone and figure out what was happening to her memory. The laundry room was on deck 3. Industrial washers and dryers running constantly. The smell of bleach and detergent filled the air. Steam made everything hazy and dreamlike. Lisa followed the tracker to a corner near the commercial washing machines. According to the GPS, her phone was right there. But Lisa saw only empty floor space. She knelt down and felt around with her hands. Nothing, just hot concrete and lint. But her fingers found something else. Something carved into the floor. Letters scratched deep into the concrete. Lisa Martianizi, her name. Carved into the floor of the ship's laundry room, like someone had been planning for her arrival. Lisa stood up fast, too fast. The steam and bleach fumes made her dizzy. She stumbled toward the exit. This is when she heard her phone ringing. The sound was coming from inside one of the washing machines. Lisa followed the ringtone to a large commercial washer in the back corner. Through the glass door, she could see her pink iPhone case tumbling around with a load of white towels. But that was impossible. Her phone was waterproof, but it wouldn't to survive a commercial washing machine cycle. Lisa opened the washer door. The phone stopped ringing immediately. She reached into the hot water and pulled out her device. It was bone dry, not a drop of water on it. Lisa powered on the phone. It worked perfectly. All her apps were there. All her photos, all her contacts, except for one new entry in her contacts list. Jimmy, Paradise Island, ghost tours. Lisa didn't remember adding that contact. She had never taken a ghost tour. She had never been to Paradise Island. Had she? Lisa pressed the call button. The phone rang once before connecting. You found your phone, a man's voice. Familiar, the bartender from Jimmy's bar. How did you get this number? You gave it to me, remember? When you signed up for the midnight tour. Lisa's memory felt fuzzy, like trying to remember a dream after waking up. What midnight tour? The one that starts in 10 minutes. Deck 14, crew quarters. I'll be waiting. The line went dead. Lisa stared at her phone. Deck 14 didn't exist on this ship. The highest passenger deck was 12, but her Find My Device app was showing a new location. Deck 14, room 1444. Lisa took the elevator as high as it would go. Deck 12, then she found a service stairway marked crew only. It led up to a deck that wasn't on any passenger map. Deck 14 was different from the rest of the ship. Older, the walls were painted institutional green instead of the warm colors from the passenger areas. The air smelled like rust and old cigarettes. Room 1444 was at the end of a narrow hallway. The door was standing open. Inside, Lisa could see a small room with bunk beds and a tiny porthole. Jimmy the bartender was sitting on one of the bunks. Same crooked smile, same tropical shirt, but his skin looked pale under the fluorescent lights. Welcome to the real Paradise Island tour. Lisa stepped into the room. This ISN to Paradise Island. This is just a crew cabin. Jimmy gestured toward the porthole. Take a look outside. Lisa peered through the small window. Instead of ocean, she saw tropical beaches, palm trees, a tiki bar with tourists drinking colorful cocktails. Paradise Island, exactly as she remembered it. How is that possible? Jimmy stood up from the bunk. Some passengers never really leave the islands. Lisa. They think they back on the ship, but part of them stays behind. In the places where they were happiest. Lisa's head was spinning. Are you saying I'm still on Paradise Island? I'm saying you never left. Your body is on that cruise ship, but your mind is here with me. Has been for 3 days now. Lisa looked at her phone. The Find My Device tracker was showing her location as room 1444. But that was impossible. She was holding the phone in her hand. The phone was never lost, Jimmy continued. It's been tracking your consciousness as it moves between realities. Ship to island, island to ship, back and forth like a ghost caught between worlds. Lisa backed toward the door. This is insane. I'm going back to my room. Your room is right here. Lisa, this is where you belong now. Jimmy pointed to the other bunk. Lisa's suitcase was sitting on it. Her clothes were hanging in the tiny closet. Her toiletries were arranged on the small sink, like she had been living here for days. The other passengers on your ship, Jimmy said. They think you were sleepwalking, wandering the decks at night, talking to yourself. The crew is getting worried about you. Lisa pulled out her phone and tried to call someone. Anyone, but all the contacts had been replaced with the same entry. Jimmy, Paradise Island, ghost tours over and over. Hundreds of identical contacts. You can call the living world from here, Lisa. But you can stay. Paradise Island is beautiful, perfect weather, unlimited drinks, and I'll never have to go back to your boring job in Tampa. Lisa looked through the porthole again. The tropical paradise was still there, but now she could see other people on the beach. Dozens of tourists who looked pale and translucent, like ghosts. How many people have you trapped here? Jimmy's smile widened. Not trapped, Lisa, liberated. From deadlines, from mortgages, from all the stress of the real world. Lisa ran for the door, but the hallway outside was different now. Instead of ship corridors, she saw a tropical resort, bamboo walls, thatched roofs, the sound of steel drums in the distance. She was back on Paradise Island, but it felt like a prison made of perfect weather and eternal vacation. Lisa's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Your body is in the ship, this medical bay. Unresponsive for 72 hours. The doctors say you were in some kind of coma. Lisa stared at the screen. Another message appeared, but I know where you really are. And I am coming to get you. The message was signed Derek, her boyfriend from Tampa. Lisa felt hope for the first time in days. Derek was coming, but how could he find her in a place that didn't really exist? Her phone buzzed one more time. See you soon, babe. Room 1444, deck 14. Lisa's blood went cold. Derek was walking into Jimmy's trap, just like she had, and there was nothing she could do to warn him from inside this tropical nightmare. Unless she could figure out how to escape Paradise Island before Derek became its newest permanent resident. Story 3. Walking Dead Cruise Curse. The actor playing a zombie extra collapsed mid-bite during the Walking Dead dinner theater show. Blood poured from his mouth as he convulsed on the deck of the Celebrity Eclipse, but this was not part of the performance. Dave Mitchell had been working as a cruise entertainment coordinator for 6 years. He knew the difference between stage blood and the real thing. This was real, and it was spreading. 3 more zombie actors dropped within minutes. Then 2 fans in the audience started vomiting blood. The ship, this medical bay filled with passengers suffering from symptoms that looked exactly like the fictional zombie virus from the show. But viruses did not work that fast, and healthy people did not start bleeding from their eyes without cause. Dave tried to maintain order as panic spread through the themed cruise. 2,000 Walking Dead fans had paid premium prices for this 7-day voyage with cast members from the hit show. They wanted zombie apocalypse entertainment, not a real medical emergency. But the ship's doctor was overwhelmed. 60 people were now showing symptoms: fever, bleeding, violent convulsions. The medical staff had no idea what was causing the outbreak. Dave started investigating the catering records. Food poisoning was the most likely explanation, but the sick passengers had eaten different meals at different times. No common food source, no contaminated water supply. The only thing they shared was attendance at the zombie makeup workshops and dinner theater shows. That was when Dave found the first body. Marcus Webb, one of the show's zombie choreographers, was discovered in his cabin with his throat torn out. The wounds looked like animal bites, but there were no animals on the ship. The forensic evidence made no sense. Dave examined the cabin more carefully. Webb's zombie makeup kit was open on the dresser, the special effects blood and latex wounds he used for the show. But something was different about the makeup. The fake blood was still wet, still warm, like it had come from a living person instead of a bottle. Dave tested the makeup with a medical kit from the ship, this emergency supplies. The results made his hands shake. The fake blood was real human blood. Fresh human blood, less than an hour old. Someone was using actual blood and tissue in the zombie special effects. But where was it coming from? Dave checked the ship's passenger manifest against the medical records. 7 people who had attended the makeup workshops were now missing from their cabins. Not sick, not in the medical bay. Gone completely. The missing passengers had all been selected for special zombie transformation sessions with Marcus Webb. Private makeup consultations in his cabin where he promised to create the most realistic undead effects they had ever seen. Dave realized Webb had been killing passengers and using their blood and flesh for his makeup demonstrations. The other sick people had been exposed to infected tissue during the workshops. But Webb was dead too. Someone had killed him the same way he had been killing passengers. Dave found Webb's private notes hidden in his cabin safe. The combination was written on a piece of paper tucked inside his Walking Dead script, as if he wanted someone to find it. The notes revealed something that made Dave's blood freeze. Webb was not working alone. He was part of an experimental program funded by a pharmaceutical company. They were using the themed cruise as cover for biological weapons testing. The zombie virus from the show was fiction, but the company had developed a real pathogen that produced similar symptoms. They were testing it on unsuspecting passengers to see how quickly it could spread in a confined environment. The cruise ship was a floating laboratory. The passengers were test subjects, and the Walking Dead theme was perfect camouflage for a bioweapons experiment. Dave tried to radio the Coast Guard, but the ship's communications were jammed. Every emergency frequency was blocked. The pharmaceutical company had made sure no outside help could reach the Eclipse. But Dave found something else in Webb's notes. The antidote formula. The company had developed a cure for their artificial zombie virus, but they were withholding it to study the disease progression. Dave broke into the ship's medical supply room and started mixing the antidote according to Webb's instructions. But he needed equipment that was not available in the standard cruise medical bay. The pharmaceutical company had secretly installed a research laboratory in the ship's lower decks. Hidden behind false walls and security doors, Webb's notes included access codes for the restricted areas. Dave made his way through the ship's service corridors, avoiding the growing number of infected passengers who were becoming increasingly violent and unpredictable. The artificial virus was affecting their brain chemistry, making them aggressive and cannibalistic. Just like real zombies, Dave found the hidden laboratory filled with medical equipment and computer terminals. The pharmaceutical company had been monitoring the outbreak remotely, recording data on infection rates and symptom progression. But the experiment had gone wrong. The virus was mutating faster than expected, becoming more virulent and spreading through airborne transmission instead of just blood contact. The company had lost control of their own bioweapon. Dave started synthesizing the antidote using the lab equipment, but the process would take hours, and the infected passengers were getting worse. Some had stopped responding to their names. Others were trying to bite anyone who came near them. The Walking Dead cruise was becoming a real zombie apocalypse. Dave discovered security footage showing other pharmaceutical employees among the crew staff. The entire entertainment crew was part of the experiment. They had been dosing passengers with the virus through contaminated makeup, drinks, and food samples. But something had gone wrong with their timeline. The virus was supposed to remain dormant until after the cruise ended. Instead, it had activated early, trapping the research team on a ship full of infected test subjects. Marcus Webb had been killed by his own colleagues when he tried to stop the experiment. He had developed a conscience and wanted to save the passengers. His death was meant to look like a zombie attack to maintain the cover story. Dave found Webb's final video message hidden on a laptop in the lab. Webb explained that the pharmaceutical company was planning to blame the outbreak on contaminated food and cover up the bioweapons testing. Hundreds of innocent people would die to protect corporate secrets. Dave finished synthesizing the antidote just as infected passengers started breaking through the laboratory security doors. Their eyes were bloodshot and unfocused. They moved with jerky, unnatural motions that exactly matched the zombie behavior from the television show. Life was imitating art in the most horrifying way possible. Dave loaded the antidote into the ship's ventilation system, hoping to distribute it through the air circulation before the infection became irreversible. But he had no way to know if the cure would work or if it was already too late. The pharmaceutical company, its remote monitoring showed that 90% of the passengers were now infected. The artificial zombie virus had exceeded all their projections for transmission speed and virulence. Dave barricaded himself in the laboratory and waited for either the antidote to take effect or the infected passengers to break through his defenses. The ship's emergency beacon started transmitting automatically when the outbreak reached critical levels. Coast Guard helicopters appeared on the horizon within hours, but they maintained a safe distance from the Eclipse. Someone had warned them about the bioweapons experiment. Dave watched through the laboratory's porthole as military vessels surrounded the cruise ship. Not rescue ships, containment vessels. The government was prepared to sink the Eclipse with everyone on board to prevent the artificial virus from reaching shore. The antidote had worked for some passengers. Dave could see them moving normally on the security monitors, but others remained infected, still displaying zombie-like symptoms. The cure was not 100% effective. The military gave Dave a choice over the ship's radio. Surrender the virus samples and research data, or watch 4,000 people die when they torpedoed the Eclipse. Dave handed over everything. The pharmaceutical company, files, his research notes, the remaining antidote samples, evidence of the illegal bioweapons testing. In exchange, the military evacuated the survivors and covered up the real cause of the outbreak. The official story blamed food poisoning and mass hysteria. No mention of zombie viruses or corporate bioweapons. Dave was debriefed by government agents and sworn to secrecy. The pharmaceutical company executives were quietly arrested and disappeared into federal custody. The Eclipse was decontaminated and returned to service with a different name. The Walking Dead curse became urban legend among cruise industry workers. A cautionary tale about themed entertainment gone wrong. But Dave knows the truth. The artificial zombie virus still exists in government laboratories. The research continues under military oversight. And sometimes, late at night, Dave gets phone calls from other entertainment coordinators on themed cruises. Horror movie events and vampire parties where passengers start showing unusual symptoms. The bioweapons testing never really stopped. It just moved to different ships with different themes. Dave tries to warn them, but nobody believes stories about pharmaceutical companies using cruise passengers as test subjects. After all, who would think that zombie entertainment could become a real zombie apocalypse? The next time you book a themed cruise, remember that some experiments never end. They just find new ways to blend in with the entertainment. Story 4. Halloween Clown Stalker. The clown was watching Mike Sullivan from across the Halloween deck party when the first scream echoed through the Royal Caribbean Voyager. The painted white face turned toward the sound with unnatural precision, and Mike noticed something that made his blood freeze. The clown had no costume number, no identification badge, no passenger wristband. Mike had been working cruise ship security for 8 years. He knew the Halloween costume rules by heart. Every passenger in costume had to register with guest services and wear a numbered badge. No exceptions, no masks that covered the entire face, no weapons, even fake ones. But this clown broke every rule. The full face paint made identification impossible. The baggy costume hid the body shape completely. And those oversized gloves could conceal anything. Mike started moving through the crowd toward the clown, but the figure melted into the sea of pirates and zombies before he could get close. Like it had vanished into thin air. That was when Mike found the first body. Jennifer Walsh from Ohio lay crumpled behind a lifeboat, her vampire costume torn and bloody. But the wounds were not from any Halloween prop. Someone had used a real knife on her throat. Clean cuts, professional technique. This was not some party gone wrong. This was murder. Mike called for backup and sealed off the crime scene. But when the other security officers arrived, they found something impossible. Jennifer Walsh was registered in cabin 2247. But according to the passenger manifest, she had never boarded the ship. She did not exist in the cruise line's computer system. Mike checked the security footage from the boarding process. No record of Jennifer Walsh getting on the ship. No luggage scan. No check-in process. She had appeared on the Voyager like a ghost. But ghosts did not bleed out behind lifeboats. Mike started reviewing the costume registration records. Over 300 passengers had signed up for the Halloween party. Pirates, witches, superheroes, zombies. All accounted for except one. The clown had never registered, had never checked in with guest services, had never been assigned a costume number. But somehow, it was on the ship. Mike studied the passenger manifest more carefully. The Voyager was carrying 4,200 people on this 7-day Caribbean cruise. But the ship's dining records showed meals being served to 4,201 passengers. Someone extra was on board. Someone who had bypassed all the security systems and identification procedures. The clown found its second victim during the midnight costume contest. Robert Chen from San Francisco was discovered in his cabin, dressed as a zombie, with very real bite marks on his neck and arms. The wounds were human, adult teeth marks, like someone had tried to eat him alive. But Robert Chen was not in the computer system either. According to cruise records, cabin 3156 was empty. No passenger assigned, no luggage stored, no meal plan activated. Mike realized he was dealing with something beyond normal security protocols. Passengers who did not exist were being killed by a clown that should not be on the ship. He started checking the employment records. Every crew member was accounted for. No unauthorized personnel, no stowaways, no former employees seeking revenge. But the galley record showed food being prepared for one extra crew member. Someone was eating in the staff areas without being officially employed by the cruise line. The clown was not just stalking passengers. It was living in the crew quarters, moving through the ship, its restricted areas like it belonged there. Mike accessed the ship, its construction blueprints. The Voyager had been built in Finland 12 years earlier. Standard cruise ship layout, no hidden passages, no secret compartments. But when Mike compared the blueprints to the actual ship, he found discrepancies. Extra ventilation shafts that were not in the original plans. Service corridors that led to spaces that should not exist. Someone had modified the ship during construction, had created hidden pathways that allowed movement without being detected by security cameras. The clown was not just hiding on the Voyager. The ship had been built specifically to hide the clown. Mike tried to access the construction records from the Finnish shipyard. The files were classified, locked behind corporate firewalls that required government clearance to access. But Mike found something else in the public records. The Voyager was not the only ship built with these modifications. 3 other cruise vessels from the same shipyard had similar hidden passages. And all 3 ships had experienced unexplained passenger disappearances over the past decade. Mike was looking at a serial killer who traveled from ship to ship using secret passages built into the vessels themselves. A predator who could appear and disappear at will, leaving no trace in official records. But why Halloween? Why the clown costume? Mike studied the disappearance patterns from the other ships. The victims always vanished during themed costume parties. Halloween, Mardi Gras, New Year's Eve, events where masks and disguises were encouraged. The killer used the chaos of costume parties to blend in and select victims. The clown outfit was perfect camouflage. Scary but not unusual during Halloween celebrations. Mike realized he was not dealing with a random psychopath. This was a methodical hunter who had spent years perfecting a system for stalking passengers on cruise ships. And now Mike was trapped on a ship with 4,200 potential victims and a killer who knew every hidden passage and blind spot. The third body appeared during the haunted house attraction on Deck 7. Maria Santos from Texas was found inside the fake cemetery display, arranged like she was part of the Halloween decorations. Her cheerleader costume was covered in real blood, but her wounds were something Mike had never seen before. Surgical incisions, professional cuts made with medical instruments, like someone had been practicing anatomy on a living person. But Maria Santos was not in the passenger system either. According to ship records, she had never existed. Mike was starting to understand the pattern. The clown was not killing random passengers. It was killing people who were not supposed to be on the ship in the first place. People who had somehow boarded the Voyager without going through normal check-in procedures. People who existed outside the cruise line, its tracking systems. But how were they getting on board? And why was the clown targeting them specifically? Mike checked the security footage from the past 3 nights. He found his answer in the darkest corners of the ship, where the cameras barely functioned. The clown was bringing the victims on board, smuggling them through the hidden passages during port stops. People who had been kidnapped from the various Caribbean islands where the ship docked. The clown was not just a serial killer. It was running a human trafficking operation using the cruise ship as mobile headquarters. But the victims were not being sold. They were being used for something else, something that required surgical precision and medical knowledge. Mike broke into the clown, this hidden lair during the final night of the cruise. The secret compartment was behind the ship, this medical bay, accessible through ventilation shafts that did not appear on any official blueprints. What he found made him wish he had never started investigating. Operating tables, medical equipment, organ preservation containers. The clown was not just killing people. It was harvesting their organs and selling them to black market buyers. But the most horrifying discovery was the passenger list. Not the official cruise manifest. The real list. The one showing who was actually on board the Voyager. Over 200 people who did not exist in the ship, this computer system. Kidnapped from ports throughout the Caribbean. Brought on board to be butchered for their organs. Mike had stumbled into an industrial-scale organ harvesting operation that used Halloween parties as cover for murder. He tried to radio the Coast Guard, but his communications were jammed. The clown had been watching him. Knew he was getting close to the truth. Mike heard footsteps in the ventilation shaft above him. Slow, deliberate steps that belonged to someone wearing oversized clown shoes. The killer was coming for him. Mike grabbed the evidence files and ran through the hidden passages, trying to reach the main deck where other passengers could see what was happening. But the clown knew the secret routes better than anyone. Every corridor Mike entered, the clown was already waiting. Every exit he tried, those painted white features appeared in the darkness ahead of him. Mike realized he was not escaping. He was being herded, driven toward a specific destination where the clown wanted him to go. the ship's morgue, where the other victims were being stored until their organs could be harvested and shipped to buyers around the world. Mike made it to the main deck just as the ship docked in Miami. Thousands of passengers were disembarking, heading home with their Halloween memories and vacation photos. None of them knew they had been traveling with a floating slaughterhouse. Mike tried to alert the port authorities, but the evidence files had vanished from his hands. The photographs of the operating tables, the victim list, the medical equipment, all gone, like it had never existed. The clown was nowhere to be seen among the departing passengers. But Mike knew it was out there, somewhere in the crowd, already planning its next voyage. Mike quit cruise security that day. He could not work on ships anymore, knowing what kinds of horrors could be hidden in their secret passages. But sometimes, late at night, he gets emails from other cruise security officers. Reports of passengers who do not exist in computer systems, bodies found during costume parties, clowns that appear and disappear without explanation. The Halloween killer is still out there, still traveling from ship to ship, still using costume parties as hunting grounds. And every October, when the cruise lines announce their Halloween-themed voyages, Mike wonders how many passengers will board those ships and never make it home. The clown is always watching, always waiting, always hungry for the next Halloween party. Story 5. Phantom passenger Captain Rick Martinez stared at the manifest on his computer screen. Room 1247 was occupied according to the system, but housekeeping had reported the same thing for 3 days straight. Nobody was ever inside. The Caribbean Dream had sailed from Fort Lauderdale with 2,847 passengers. Every room accounted for, every guest checked in, but room 1247 remained a mystery. Rick had been running cruise ships for 15 years. He'd seen everything. Medical emergencies, fights, even a few deaths, but he'd never seen a ghost on his passenger list. The name read, J. Morrison, Jacksonville, Florida. Rick called the front desk. Pull up the boarding records for Morrison in 1247. The desk clerk typed furiously. Sir, that is weird. The record shows he boarded, but there is no security footage of him getting on the ship. Rick felt a chill run down his spine. Every passenger went through security. Every boarding was recorded. No exceptions. Check the payment method, Rick ordered. Cash, sir. Paid in full 3 months ago. No credit card on file. No emergency contact information. Rick hung up and walked to deck 12. Room 1247 was at the end of the long hallway. The carpet was darker there, like sunlight never reached that corner of the ship. He knocked on the door. No answer. Rick used his master key. The door opened to reveal a standard interior cabin. 2 beds, a small bathroom, a tiny porthole looking out at the ocean. Everything was perfectly clean. Too clean. The beds looked like nobody had ever slept in them. No wrinkles in the sheets. No indent in the pillows. The bathroom towels hung exactly as housekeeping had placed them. But something felt wrong. Rick noticed the temperature. The room was at least 10 degrees colder than the hallway. His breath came out in small white puffs. The air conditioning wasn't running. Rick checked the thermostat. It was set to 75 degrees, same as every other room on the ship. But the digital display flickered between 75 and 32 degrees. Freezing. Rick left the room and locked the door behind him. As he walked down the hallway, he heard something that made his blood freeze. Footsteps, coming from inside room 1247. Slow, deliberate footsteps, like someone pacing back and forth. Rick spun around and used his key again. The room was empty, but the footsteps continued. They seemed to be coming from above his head, from the deck above, but there was no deck above. Room 1247 was directly under the bridge. Nothing but sky and radar equipment overhead. Rick called his security chief, Danny Torres. Danny had worked cruise ships for 20 years. If anyone could figure this out, it was him. Captain, they've been getting reports about that room all week, Danny said. Housekeeping says the shower runs by itself. Always cold water. Maintenance says the lights flicker on and off every night at exactly 3:17 a.m. Any theories? Rick asked. Electrical problem, maybe. Or someone is playing games. Could be a passenger hiding in there during cleaning hours. But Rick knew better. He felt something in that room. A presence, like being watched by invisible eyes. That night, Rick decided to stake out the hallway. He positioned himself in the stairwell with a clear view of room 1247. If someone was sneaking in and out, he'd catch them. At 3:15 a.m., the hallway lights began to flicker. Rick felt the temperature drop 20 degrees in seconds. His breath turned to fog. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the door to room 1247 opened by itself. Nobody came out. Nobody went in. The door simply opened, stayed open for 30 seconds, then closed with a soft click. Rick? His hands shook as he radioed Danny. Get up to deck 12. Now. Danny arrived 5 minutes later with 2 security guards. Rick told them what he'd seen. They looked at him like he'd lost his mind. Captain, with respect, you've been working 18-hour days, Danny said. Maybe you need some rest. But Rick knew what he'd seen. He also knew he couldn't tell his crew their ship was haunted. Morale would collapse. Passengers would panic. Rick spent the next day researching the name J. Morrison. Jacksonville had no record of anyone by that name booking a cruise. The address on the manifest didn't exist. The phone number was disconnected. But Rick found something else. Something that made his skin crawl. 23 years ago, a passenger named James Morrison had died on a cruise ship in these same waters. Not on the Caribbean Dream, on her predecessor, the Island Princess, the ship that had been scrapped and rebuilt into Rick's current vessel. James Morrison had died in room 1247. Heart attack, alone in his cabin. Housekeeping didn't find his body for 3 days. Rick dug deeper into the Island Princess records. The ship had been plagued with accidents after Morrison's death. Passengers reported cold spots, equipment malfunction. 3 crew members quit, claiming they'd seen a man in room 1247 who disappeared when they looked directly at him. The cruise line had eventually scrapped the ship, but they salvaged parts. The steel, the wiring, even some of the interior fixtures, including the door to room 1247. Rick realized the horror. When they built the Caribbean Dream, they used materials from the haunted ship. They brought Morrison's spirit with them. But that wasn't the worst part. Rick checked the manifest again. This time, he noticed something that made his heart stop. J. Morrison wasn't just listed as a passenger. He was listed as crew. Position: night security officer. Shift: 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Assigned deck: 12. Rick called the crew office. Do we have a night security officer named Morrison? Yes, sir. James Morrison. Been with us since we launched. Great employee. Never misses a shift. Rick? His mouth went dry. What does he look like? I've never actually seen him. Sir. He works nights. Always leaves his reports on my desk before I get to work. Very thorough. Very professional. Rick ran to the security office. Morrison's employee file was thick with incident reports. All written in the same handwriting. All signed. J. Morrison. But the reports described things that hadn't happened. Passengers who didn't exist. Problems that were never recorded anywhere else. Rick read the latest report, dated last night. Observed unauthorized personnel in room 1247. Subject appeared to be ship's captain. Recommend disciplinary action. The report was about Rick himself. Rick, his hands trembled as he read through weeks of Morrison's reports. The ghost had been watching everyone, recording their movements, building files on passengers and crew. But why? Rick found his answer in the oldest report. Morrison's first day on the job. Ship manifest shows 2,847 living passengers. Recommend reducing number to accommodate permanent residents. Morrison wasn't just haunting the ship. He was planning something. Rick checked the passenger count. According to the computer, they still had 2,847 guests on board. But Rick had been getting reports of people feeling sick, passengers complaining about cold rooms, crew members requesting transfers to other ships. Rick realized Morrison was driving people away, making the ship unlivable for the living, preparing it for the dead. Rick found Danny in the security office. We need to evacuate room 1247, Rick said. Tell housekeeping to avoid that deck. Captain. You, scaring me. What? What's really going on? Rick couldn't explain. How do you tell your security chief that your ship is being taken over by a dead man? That night, Rick posted himself outside room 1247 with a video camera. If Morrison was real, Rick would get proof. At 3:17 a.m., the temperature dropped. Rick, his breath fogged the camera lens. The door opened. This time, Rick saw him. James Morrison looked exactly like his employee photo from 23 years ago. Middle-aged, balding, wearing a security uniform from the old Island Princess. Morrison stared directly at Rick. His eyes were black holes in his pale face. Morrison spoke, and his voice sounded like wind through empty corridors. This is my ship now, Captain. Time for you to disembark? Rick felt an invisible hand grab his throat. The camera fell from his hands and shattered on the deck. Morrison disappeared, but his voice echoed through the hallway. Manifest updated. One less passenger. Rick ran to the bridge and checked the computer. The passenger count had changed. 2,846 living souls on board. Rick's own name had been moved to a different list. A list he'd never seen before. The departed. According to the ship's computer, Captain Rick Martinez had died at 3:17 a.m. But Rick was still walking, still breathing, still trying to save his ship. Rick realized the horrible truth. Morrison wasn't killing people. He was changing their status, moving them from the world of the living to something else. Rick tried to radio the Coast Guard, but the radio was dead. He tried the satellite phone. Nothing. Morrison had cut them off from the outside world. Over the next 3 days, more crew members reported feeling strange. Cold, disconnected. They kept working, but they moved differently. Spoke differently, like puppets being controlled by invisible strings. Rick checked the manifest obsessively. The number of living passengers dropped every night. 2,845, 2,844, 2,843. The departed list grew longer. Rick, his own reflection began to fade. In mirrors, he looked translucent, like he was disappearing one piece at a time. Morrison appeared to Rick one final time, in the captain's quarters. "Welcome to the permanent crew, Captain," Morrison said. "Your shift starts at midnight." Rick tried to speak, but no sound came out. He was becoming like Morrison, a ghost bound to the ship. But Rick had one last plan. If he couldn't save the passengers, he could save future victims. Rick used his final moments of humanity to send an emergency signal to the cruise line. A simple message. Recommend scrapping Caribbean Dream. Ship compromised. Rick hoped they would listen. Hoped they would destroy the ship before Morrison could reach another port. The signal sent just as Rick felt his humanity slip away completely. When the sun rose, Captain Rick Martinez was dead. But he still walked his ship, still filed his reports, still updated the manifest. The Caribbean Dream docked in Cozumel right on schedule. Passengers disembarked for their shore excursion. New passengers boarded for the return trip to Fort Lauderdale. The manifest showed 2,847 living souls. But Captain Martinez knew better. Some of those souls were more permanent than others. Story 6. Carnival flood disaster. Water poured through the ceiling like Niagara Falls. Dave Jenkins grabbed his laptop and ran as seawater flooded his stateroom on Deck 7. The fire suppression system had exploded without warning, turning the hallway into a river. Emergency alarms screamed through the Carnival Triumph. Passengers stumbled through knee-deep water, dragging suitcases and crying children. Dave had covered hurricanes for the Miami Herald. This was worse. 50 rooms were flooding. The crew herded everyone to the upper decks while maintenance teams tried to stop the deluge. Dave's room was directly under the burst pipe. Everything he owned was underwater. 6 hours later, the water was pumped out. Passengers were allowed to return and salvage what they could. Dave descended to Deck 7 with a sick feeling in his stomach. His stateroom door hung open. Water damage covered everything. But something was wrong. Dave's suitcase sat on the bed, bone dry, perfectly arranged. He had left it on the floor by the bathroom. The flood should have carried it away. Instead, someone had placed it carefully on the bed and opened it. His clothes were folded with military precision. Dave checked his laptop bag, also dry, also moved. The laptop was gone, but his camera remained. Someone had taken only specific items. Dave walked to the hallway. Other passengers were crying over ruined belongings. Waterlogged photos, destroyed electronics, soaked clothing. But Dave noticed something strange. Not every room showed the same damage pattern. Room 7142 next door was completely flooded. The elderly couple inside had lost everything. But room 7144 on the other side looked untouched. The door was locked, and no water had entered. Dave asked a crew member about it. "System malfunction," the man said quickly. Some rooms got hit worse than others, but Dave knew water didn't work that way. Gravity doesn't play favorites. If his hallway flooded, every room should show damage. Dave started taking pictures with his camera. Room after room showed the same pattern. Some completely destroyed, others perfectly preserved, like someone had chosen which rooms to flood. At the guest services desk, Dave met other passengers with similar stories. Items moved but not stolen. Belongings rearranged in impossible ways. Suitcases that should have been destroyed but were found dry and organized. A woman from Ohio showed Dave photos on her phone. Before the flood, her jewelry was scattered across the dresser. After the flood, it was arranged in perfect rows by size and color. "My husband thinks housekeeping did it," she said. But housekeeping was evacuated with everyone else. Dave interviewed more passengers. The stories got stranger. A family from Texas found their son, his toys arranged in a perfect circle on the bed. The toys had been scattered on the floor before the flood. A businessman from Chicago discovered his clothes hanging in the closet. Color coordinated, size ordered. He had thrown them in randomly when packing. Dave realized someone had been in these rooms during the flood. Someone with access. Someone who knew exactly which rooms would be hit. Dave found the ship, his maintenance chief, Carlos Mendez. Carlos had worked cruise ships for 20 years. His hands shook when Dave asked about the flood. Worst system failure I've ever seen, Carlos said. The pipes just burst. No warning. No pressure buildup. Nothing on the monitors. What about the damage pattern? Dave asked. Why were some rooms spared? Carlos looked around nervously. Sometimes these old ships have their own logic. Water finds the path of least resistance. But Dave pressed harder. Carlos, they covered natural disasters for 15 years. Water doesn't to pick and choose. What really happened? Carlos pulled Dave into a supply closet. His voice dropped to a whisper. The system didn't malfunction. Someone triggered it manually from the engineering deck. Dave, his blood went cold. Who? That is the thing. Security cameras show nobody in engineering during the flood, but the manual release was definitely activated. Dave felt pieces clicking together. The selective flooding, the rearranged belongings. Someone with inside knowledge had orchestrated this. Who has access to engineering? Dave asked. Only senior crew, captain, chief engineer, security chief, maybe 5 people total. Dave spent the evening investigating the crew. The captain had been on the bridge during the flood. Dozens of witnesses. The chief engineer was in Miami, dealing with a family emergency. Security chief was giving interviews to the Coast Guard, all accounted for. But Dave discovered something in the ship, his employment records. A former crew member named Marcus Webb had been fired 3 weeks ago. Webb had worked in engineering. He knew the ship, his systems intimately. Webb had been terminated for theft. Small items missing from passenger rooms. Nothing valuable. Personal belongings. Photos. Souvenirs. Dave found Webb's personnel file. The man had worked cruise ships for 8 years. No major incidents until recently. Then complaints started pouring in. Passengers reporting items moved or missing. Always small things. Always personal things. Like someone was collecting trophies. Dave tried to find more information about Webb, but the crew records were incomplete. No home address. No emergency contact. Even his social security number led to a dead end. Webb didn't exist outside the ship. Dave realized Webb might still be aboard. Hidden somewhere. Living in the spaces between decks that only crew members knew about. Dave spent the night searching. The ship was massive. Thousands of hiding places. Service corridors. Storage areas. Abandoned sections that passengers never saw. In the lowest deck, Dave found something that made his skin crawl. A makeshift living space. Sleeping bag. Portable stove. Cases of stolen food from the ship, his kitchen, and hundreds of passenger belongings. Photos, jewelry, children's toys, personal items arranged on shelves like a twisted museum. Each item had a label, room number, passenger name, date taken. Dave recognized some of his own things. A watch, a pen, items he thought he misplaced during the cruise. But the collection went back years. Items from passengers on dozens of different cruises. Webb had been doing this for a long time. Dave heard footsteps in the corridor. He hid behind a stack of supply boxes as someone entered the room. It was Webb, tall, thin, wearing a crew uniform that didn't belong to him anymore. Webb carried a bag of items from the flooded rooms. He began arranging them on his shelves with obsessive care, each item placed in exactly the right spot. Dave watched in horror as Webb held up a child, his teddy bear. The man smiled and pressed the toy to his face, breathing deeply. Webb was collecting more than belongings. He was collecting pieces of people's lives. Their memories, their personal connections. Dave tried to back away quietly, but he knocked over a box. The crash echoed through the small room. Webb spun around. His eyes were wild, desperate. You shouldn't be here, Webb said. His voice was calm, too calm. Dave ran. Behind him, Webb's footsteps followed. But Webb knew the ship better. Every shortcut, every hidden passage. Dave found himself trapped in a dead-end corridor. Webb approached slowly, holding a knife from the ship, his kitchen. They've been watching you, Webb said, taking pictures, asking questions. You were going to ruin everything. Dave realized Webb hadn't. He just flooded those rooms to steal belongings. He'd done it to create chaos, to cover his tracks, to make theft look like water damage. The other passengers, Dave said. They've been in their rooms for years. Webb nodded. They never even notice. A photo here, a souvenir there. They think they misplaced things. But I keep everything safe. I preserve their memories. Dave understood the sick logic. Webb wasn't just a thief. He was a collector of human experiences. He stole pieces of people's lives to make them part of his world. The flood was perfect, Webb continued. So much confusion, so much damage. I could take whatever I wanted, rearrange everything, make it look like water damage. But Dave realized something else. Webb wasn't planning to let him leave. Dave was going to become part of the collection. Webb raised the knife. Dave closed his eyes and waited. But the attack never came. Dave opened his eyes to see Webb staring at something behind him. The man, his face had gone white with terror. Dave turned around. The corridor was empty, but the temperature had dropped 20 degrees. Their breath came out in white puffs. Webb whispered, "They were here." Dave felt it too. A presence. Multiple presences, like being surrounded by invisible watchers. Webb began backing away. "I kept their things safe," he said to the empty air. "I preserved everything. You should be grateful." But the temperature kept dropping. Dave heard sounds that shouldn't exist. Whispers, footsteps, the rustling of clothes. Webb dropped the knife and ran. Dave was alone in the corridor, but he didn't feel alone. Dave understood what was happening. Webb hadn't just stolen belongings. He'd stolen pieces of souls, memories given physical form. And now those memories were reclaiming what belonged to them. Dave made it back to his stateroom. The next morning, the ship docked in New Orleans. Passengers disembarked normally. The flood was written off as a mechanical failure. Dave filed his story, but the editor killed it. Too unbelievable. Too many loose ends. But Dave kept investigating. He tracked down other passengers from Webb's collection. People who cruised on the same ships over the years. They all reported the same thing. Items going missing. Belongings rearranged. The feeling of being watched in their rooms. Dave found records of Webb working on 6 different cruise ships over 8 years. Always the same pattern. Always the same complaints. And on every ship, after Webb was fired or transferred, crew members reported strange occurrences. Cold spots, whispers in empty corridors, personal items appearing and disappearing. Dave realized Webb had left something behind on every ship. Not just stolen belongings, but pieces of the lives he collected. Fragments of memory that couldn't find their way home. 6 months later, Dave received a call from a cruise line security officer. The Carnival Triumph was being decommissioned. Too many passenger complaints about paranormal activity. The ship would be scrapped, cut apart, sold for metal. But Dave wondered what would happen to all those collected memories. All those fragments of lives that Webb had stolen and scattered through the ship, as hidden spaces. Would they find peace when the ship was destroyed? Or would they move on to new vessels? New rooms to haunt? Dave never found out what happened to Marcus Webb. The man had vanished completely. No trace on any ship. No record of him anywhere. But sometimes, late at night, Dave received emails from passengers on other cruise ships. Always the same story. Items missing. Belongings rearranged. The feeling of being watched. And attached to each email, a photo of a ship as crew member. Always different faces. Always different names. But always the same wild, desperate eyes. The collection was still growing. Story 7. Carnival Fire Crisis. The lights died first. Then came the screaming. Mike Rodriguez pressed his face against the porthole, watching orange flames dance across the generator deck 3 stories below. The Carnival Destiny listed hard to starboard, and somewhere in the bowels of the ship, metal groaned like a wounded animal. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." The intercom crackled with static. "We are experiencing a minor electrical issue. Please remain calm and return to your cabins." Minor issue? Right. Mike had worked 15 years as a marine electrician in San Diego. He knew the smell of burning copper wiring. He knew what happened when seawater hit hot metal. And he knew they were royally screwed. The emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red. Passengers stumbled through the corridors, some still clutching their hurricane glasses from the pool deck bar. A kid somewhere was crying for his mom. The ship's engines had gone silent 20 minutes ago. Mike shouldered through the crowd toward the engine room access. If the crew wasn't talking, someone needed to see how bad this really was. The metal stairwell echoed with his footsteps as he descended into the belly of the ship. The heat hit him like a wall. Emergency pumps chugged somewhere in the darkness, fighting a losing battle against rising water. Mike pulled out his phone, his flashlight, and swept it across the corridor. That is when he saw the first one. A figure stood at the far end of the hallway, perfectly still. Mike blinked. And it was gone. "Hey!" His voice echoed off the walls. "You okay down here?" "Nothing. Just the steady drip of water and the distant hum of failing systems." Mike pushed deeper into the ship, his guts. The generator room door hung open, revealing a blackened hellscape of twisted metal and sparking cables. The smell of melted plastic made his eyes water. But it was the logbook on the duty officer's desk that made his blood run cold. Day 847, the passengers still dawn, Tino. "We keep the lights on in their quarters, but the rest of the ship runs on battery power now." "How long could we keep this up?" Mike flipped back through the pages. Day 846. Day 845. The entries stretched back over 2 years, all in different handwriting, all describing the same impossible situation. Day 623 saw Jimmy Torino again today. Been dead since the first fire. But there he was, helping with the breakfast service like nothing happened. The passengers done, he seemed to notice. They never notice. Day 401, new theory. We're not stranded. We're stuck, like a record with a scratch, playing the same song over and over. The fire happens every night at 11:47 p.m. The lights go out, the passengers panic, and by morning, they've forgotten everything. Mike? His hands shook as he turned the pages. His own name appeared in an entry dated 6 months ago. Day 678, Mike Rodriguez, marine electrician from San Diego, came down to check the generator room today. Same as always, he finds this logbook, reads about the loop, tries to warn the passengers. They never believe him. By tomorrow, he won to remember either. The phone slipped from his numb fingers, clattering to the floor. The light spun wildly before settling on a dark corner where another figure stood watching him. This one didn't. He disappeared. "You were starting to remember, Aaron, to you." The voice belonged to a crew member, but his uniform was burned black and his face was wrong somehow. Too pale, too still. Mike backed toward the door. His eyes and real. This is some kind of sick joke. It's real as anything else down here. They've been through this conversation 847 times. Mike, you always say the same thing. The dead crew member stepped into the light. Half his face was melted away, revealing bone beneath charred flesh. The fire was supposed to be contained. Quick electrical fix, they said. But something went wrong. Really wrong. And when the Coast Guard finally found us 3 days later, Mike ran. He sprinted through the corridors, past emergency lighting that flickered like dying candles. Behind him, he could hear them following. Not footsteps exactly, more like the sound of wet cloth dragging across metal. The passenger deck seemed normal enough. Families huddled in their rooms, waiting for updates. The casino still glowed with neon light, though the slot machine stood silent. In the main dining hall, the breakfast buffet sat untouched, steam still rising from the chafing dishes. But Mike noticed things now that he missed before. The way conversation stopped when he walked by. The way his eyes didn't quite focus on him. The way the same little girl in the yellow dress kept appearing in different parts of the ship. He found Captain Morrison in the wheelhouse, staring out at an ocean that stretched endlessly in all directions. No horizon, no other ships, just dark water under a sky the color of old bones. "Captain, we need to talk." Morrison turned slowly. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken deep in their sockets. Day 847. Mike, you're early tonight. You know what is happening here? Of course I know. Been knowing for 2 years, 4 months, and 17 days. Give or take. Morrison, this laugh sounded like grinding gears. Want to know the funny part? The Coast Guard did find us. Rescued every soul aboard. Made the papers and everything. Mike felt something cold settle in his chest. Then how are we? Still here? Good question. Near as I can figure, some folks just can't let go. The fire was so bad, so sudden. That part of us got stuck right here in those final moments. The fear, the panic, the desperate need to save everyone. The captain pointed to a newspaper clipping taped to the window. Cruise ship fire claims 847 lives. The photograph showed the Carnival Destiny listing heavily, smoke pouring from multiple decks. But the passengers think they survived, Morrison continued. Their minds can handle the truth, so they keep living the same 3 days over and over. The fire starts every night at 11:47. By morning, they've forgotten. Fresh slate, clean memory. Mike stared at the newspaper. His own face looked back from the list of victims. Michael Rodriguez, 43, San Diego, California. Some of the crew remember, like you and me. We're the lucky ones, I guess. Get to watch our own personal hell play out every single night. There has to be a way out. You think so? Day 847. Mike, you've been trying to find a way out for 847 days. Tomorrow you'll wake up and try again. And the day after that. Mike grabbed the captain by the shoulders. The passengers need to know. If they understood what really happened, maybe we could all move on. Morrison, the smile was sad and knowing. You tried that on day 200, and day 300, and day 500. They can hear you, Mike. Their minds won. Let them. But Mike was already running again, this time toward the passenger decks. He had to try. Even if he failed before, even if he fail again, he had to try. The dining hall was packed for the midnight buffet. Families laughed and chatted, loading their plates with food that would reset by morning. Mike jumped onto a table, knocking over glasses and sending silverware clattering to the floor. Listen to me, all of you. The fire isn't just an electrical problem. We're all dead. The ship went down 2 years ago. A few people looked up with mild annoyance, like he was a street performer interrupting their dinner. Check your phones. Check the date. They've been living the same 3 days over and over. A security guard approached, speaking into his radio. They got a disturbance in the main dining hall. Passenger seems to be having some kind of breakdown. Mike kept shouting as they dragged him away. The figures you see in the smoke, those are the crew members who died in the fire. We're trapped here. All of us. They sedated him in the medical bay. When he woke up, it was morning again, and the ship was sailing smoothly through calm waters. The breakfast buffet was set up exactly as it had been the day before. The same conversations echoed through the dining hall. The same little girl in the yellow dress skipped past his table. Mike tried to remember what had upset him so much. Something about a fire, something about being trapped, but the details slipped away like smoke, and by the time he finished his coffee, the whole thing felt like nothing more than a bad dream. That evening, as he headed back to his cabin, the lights died first. Then came the screaming, and in the growing darkness, as orange flames danced across the generator deck, Mike Rodriguez pressed his face against the porthole and tried to remember why this all felt so familiar. Below in the engine room, a new entry appeared in the logbook, day 848. Story 8. Mystery of the unseen stalker. Marcus dropped his phone. The screen cracked against the ferry deck, but he couldn't look away from the man standing at the rail. The same man, again, 3 ports, 3 different states, always watching, always there when Marcus looked up from his laptop or turned from the snack bar. Gray jacket, black baseball cap, that twisted smile that never reached his eyes. Marcus worked cargo ships up and down the East Coast. 20 years of hauling freight from Boston to Savannah. He knew every port, every face, every regular passenger who rode the commercial ferries between jobs. This man was not one of them. The stranger turned, made eye contact, waved. Marcus ran, his boots hammered against the metal deck. Passengers scattered. He reached the spot where the man had stood. Empty. Just an old woman feeding seagulls and a kid playing on his phone. Did you see him? Marcus grabbed the woman, his shoulder. Gray jacket, black hat. He was right here. She jerked away. See who? Honey, you okay? Marcus spun in circles. The deck stretched 40 feet in both directions. No doors, no stairs, no way off except past Marcus himself. The man had vanished. This started 2 weeks ago in Portland, Maine. Marcus was grabbing coffee before his shift when he spotted someone watching him through the cafe window. Same gray jacket, same black hat, same sick smile, but when Marcus pushed outside, the sidewalk was empty. He figured it was nothing. Urban paranoia. Too much caffeine. Too many true crime podcasts during those long drives between ports. Then Norfolk, Virginia. The man stood at the end of Pier 7 while Marcus loaded containers. When Marcus looked again, gone. Security cameras showed nothing. The dock supervisor had no record of anyone matching that description. Now here in Charleston, South Carolina. Third time. Third impossible disappearance. Marcus picked up his cracked phone. His hands shook as he scrolled through his contacts. Who could he call? His ex-wife would hang up. His brother lived in Seattle. The police would think he was crazy. Maybe he was. The ferry horn blasted. Departure time. Marcus stumbled toward his truck, parked in the cargo hold with dozens of other commercial vehicles. He needed to focus, do his job, deliver the load to Savannah by morning. But as the ferry pulled away from Charleston Harbor, Marcus caught movement in his side mirror. Gray jacket, black hat, sitting in a sedan 3 cars back. Impossible. The ferry was full. Every vehicle had been loaded an hour ago. Marcus watched that sedan drive aboard. A middle-aged woman at the wheel. No passenger. Now there was a passenger. The ferry rocked in rough water. Marcus gripped his steering wheel. Tried to think rationally. Stress hallucinations, sleep deprivation, carbon monoxide from all the exhaust fumes down here in the hold. Anything but what his gut was telling him. The man in the gray jacket opened his car door. Marcus hit his horn. The sound echoed through the metal hold like a scream. Other drivers looked around confused. The woman in the sedan glanced in her rearview mirror, then got out to check her trunk. She was alone, but Marcus could see him, walking between the cars, getting closer, that smile spreading wider with each step. Marcus threw his truck in reverse. Tires squealed, metal crunched as he backed into a pickup truck behind him. He shifted to drive and punched the gas. His truck lurched forward, clipped a Honda, scraped against a delivery van. Other drivers were honking now, shouting, getting out of their vehicles. Marcus didn't care. He had to get away from the gray jacket, from that smile, but there was nowhere to go. The ferry was 200 feet long and sealed tight. He was trapped with 100 other vehicles and whatever was hunting him. The truck stalled. Marcus cranked the ignition. Nothing. He tried again. The engine turned over but wouldn't catch. In his mirror, he could see the man walking closer, almost to his bumper now. The engine caught. Marcus floored it and shot forward, weaving between cars toward the front of the hold. He had to reach the passenger deck. Find help. Find witnesses. He slammed on the brakes at the loading ramp. The metal gate was locked. No way up. No escape. A tap on his window. Marcus turned. The man in the gray jacket stood beside his door. Up close, Marcus could see details that made his stomach lurch. The jacket was faded and salt-stained, like it had been underwater for years. The baseball cap was moldy around the edges. And the man, his skin was wrong. Too pale, too smooth, like plastic. But the worst part was his eyes. They weren't quite human. Too dark, too deep, like looking into empty wells. The man mouthed something through the glass. Marcus couldn't hear the words over the engine noise and the ferry's vibrations, but he could read the lips. I've been waiting for you. Marcus hit the gas. The truck shot forward and slammed into the loading gate. Metal shrieked. The gate held. Marcus reversed and tried again. And again. On the fourth impact, the gate buckled enough for him to squeeze through. Marcus abandoned his truck and ran up the ramp to the passenger deck. Cold ocean wind hit his face. The deck was crowded with people enjoying the sunset over Charleston Harbor. Normal people, living people. Marcus pushed through them toward the ferry's bridge. He had to tell the captain. Get the ship turned around. Call the Coast Guard. Captain! Marcus pounded on the bridge door. Emergency! There's someone on board who shouldn't be here. A crew member opened the door. Young guy with kind eyes and a concerned expression. Sir, you need to calm down. What is the problem? There's a man. Gray jacket, black hat. He's been following me for weeks. He is down in the cargo hold right now. The crew member glanced over Marcus' shoulder. Gray jacket, black hat. Marcus spun around. The man stood 20 feet away, leaning against the rail. Still smiling. Yes, right there. You see him? The crew member looked confused. Sir, I don't see anyone matching that description. Are you feeling okay? Do you need medical attention? Marcus looked again. The man was gone. But this time was different. This time Marcus had been watching. There was no crowd to vanish into. No doors to slip through. The man had simply stopped existing. Like he had never been there at all. The crew member was talking, but Marcus couldn't hear him over the blood rushing in his ears. He stumbled toward the rail where the man had been standing. A small plaque was mounted there. Brass, green with age. Marcus had never noticed it before, but ferry workers probably walked past it every day without reading it. The plaque read, in memory of Thomas Garrett, lost overboard October 15, 2003. Gray jacket, black cap, eternal smile. Forever watching over those who travel these waters. Marcus' vision tunneled. 20 years he'd been riding these ferries. 20 years of the same routes, the same ports, the same waters. October 15, 2003. That was the day Marcus started working cargo ships. His first day on the job, his first day traveling these waters. The ferry horn blasted again. They were approaching Savannah. Marcus looked up from the plaque and realized the deck was empty. All the passengers had gone below to return to their vehicles. All except one. Thomas Garrett stood at the far end of the deck. Gray jacket flapping in the wind. Black cap pulled low, but his smile was different now. Not threatening, almost sad. He raised one pale hand in what might have been a wave or warning. Then he spoke, and somehow Marcus could hear him perfectly despite the wind and the engines and the impossible distance between them. Welcome to the crew, Marcus. We They got a lot of work to do. The lights went out. When they came back on, Marcus was alone. But as the ferry docked in Savannah, as the cargo hold filled with exhaust and engine noise, as Marcus walked down the ramp past his abandoned truck with its cracked windshield and dented bumper, he could feel eyes watching him. And in the reflection of every window, every mirror, every piece of polished metal, he caught glimpses of gray jackets and black hats and smiles that never quite reached their eyes. The crew was growing, and Marcus was no longer just a passenger. Story 9. Doppelganger. In the dining room, the fork froze halfway to Marcus' mouth as his daughter Emma grabbed his wrist. Her fingers dug into his skin like ice picks. "Dad," her voice came out strangled. "Look!" Across the cruise ship's dining room, a girl who looked exactly like Emma was refilling water glasses at table 12. Same auburn hair, same freckles scattered across her nose, same pink nail polish she begged her mom to buy at Target 3 weeks ago. The doppelganger moved with Emma's exact mannerisms. The way she tucked her hair behind her left ear, the slight limp from her soccer injury last spring, even the small scar on her chin from falling off her bike at age 7. Mark, his wife Sarah, followed their gaze and dropped her spoon. It clattered against her bowl, the sound sharp in the sudden silence that had fallen over their table. "That was impossible," Sarah whispered. Emma's grip tightened on Mark's arm. "She is wearing my clothes from yesterday. The purple top with the butterfly. I packed it at the bottom of my suitcase." The other Emma hadn't noticed them yet. She continued her rounds, pouring water with mechanical precision. Other passengers smiled and thanked her. Nobody else seemed disturbed by what they were seeing. Mark had been a construction foreman for 20 years. He dealt in facts, concrete foundations, level measurements, things that made sense. This didn't make sense. "Stay here," he told his family. He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. The dining room felt too warm suddenly. The air conditioning couldn't keep up with the Florida heat seeping through the ship's hull. Or maybe the heat was coming from inside him. Mark walked across the dining room on unsteady legs. His heart hammered against his ribs. The other Emma was closer now. Her face came into sharp focus. It wasn't just similar. It was exact, down to the small mole above her upper lip that Emma had always been self-conscious about. Down to the way her left eyebrow had a tiny gap from when she overtweezed it last month. "Excuse me," Mark said. The girl looked up. Emma's brown eyes stared back at him. But they were empty, hollow, like looking into a well at midnight. "Can I help you, sir?" Her voice was Emma's voice, but wrong somehow. Too flat, too rehearsed. "What is your name?" I'm sorry, I need to finish serving these tables." She moved to walk past him. Mark blocked her path. "I asked you a question." The thing wearing his daughter's face smiled. Emma's smile, but it never reached those dead eyes. "I really need to get back to work, sir." Mark felt a hand on his shoulder. He spun around to find a man in a crisp white uniform. The name tag read, "Manager, Carlos Vega." "Is there a problem here?" Carlos asked. His accent was slight but noticeable. "Spanish, maybe?" "This girl," Mark pointed behind him. "She looks exactly like my daughter." "Exactly. I want to know who she is." Carlos looked past Mark. His eyebrows drew together. I'm sorry, sir." "What girl?" Mark turned around. The spot where the other Emma had been standing was empty. He scanned the dining room frantically. She was gone. She was right here, serving water, auburn hair, about 5'4", wearing a purple top. Carlos shook his head slowly. "Sir, we don't. Do you have any staff member matching that description? Our dining room servers all wear white uniforms. And we don't employ anyone under 18. That is impossible. My whole family saw her. She was right here talking to me. Perhaps you saw one of our passengers? Sometimes people help themselves to the beverage station." Mark looked back at his table. Sarah and Emma were watching him with worried expressions. Other passengers were starting to stare. He felt heat creep up his neck. No, this wasn't a passenger. She was serving tables. She had a pitcher and everything. Carlos nodded politely. "Why, Don, did you return to your family?" "Sir, if you see this person again, please let me know immediately." Mark wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers, but the manager's tone made it clear the conversation was over. He walked back to his table feeling like everyone was watching him. Whispers followed in his wake. "What did they say?" Sarah asked as he sat down. "They said no one matching Emma's description works on the ship." Emma had gone pale. "But we all saw her, right? I am not going crazy?" "You were not crazy, sweetheart." Sarah reached across the table to squeeze Emma's hand. "We all saw her, But doubt was already creeping into Mark's mind. The dining room was crowded. The lighting was dim. Maybe he'd been mistaken. Maybe his eyes had played tricks on him. Except Emma had noticed first. Emma had grabbed his arm before he even looked up from his plate. "I want to go back to the room," Emma said. They left their dinner half finished and walked through the ship's winding corridors. The majesty of the seas was supposed to be a floating paradise. 7 days of family bonding before Emma started her senior year of high school. One last vacation before she went off to college. Now the cheerful decorations felt sinister. Smiling dolphins painted on the walls seemed to be mocking them. The overhead announcements about evening entertainment sounded distorted and strange. Their cabin was on deck 7. 3 beds crammed into a space barely larger than Mark's tool shed back home. Emma collapsed onto her bed and buried her face in her pillow. "Maybe we should go to the ship, Doctor," Sarah suggested quietly. "There's nothing wrong with us," Mark snapped. Then, more gently, "Sorry, I just rattled." Sarah sat on the edge of Emma's bed and stroked her hair. It's okay, baby. Sometimes our minds play tricks on us when we retired." But Emma lifted her head, and her eyes were sharp, alert. "Mom, she was wearing my clothes." "How do you explain that?" Sarah didn't have an answer. That night, Mark lay awake listening to the ocean slap against the ship's hull. Sarah breathed evenly beside him. Emma tossed and turned in her narrow bed. At 3 a.m., Mark heard their cabin door open. He sat up quietly. Emma's bed was empty. The door to the hallway stood open, letting in the harsh fluorescent light from the corridor. Mark slipped out of bed and followed her. The hallway was deserted except for the occasional crew member walking past with their heads down. The ship never slept completely. Someone was always working, always watching. He found Emma on deck 10, standing at the railing. The ocean stretched out endlessly in all directions. No land in sight. They were truly alone out here. "Em, what are you doing?" She didn't turn around. "I can to sleep." "Neither can I." He joined her at the railing. The wind whipped his hair around his face. "Want to talk about what happened at dinner?" "You think I'm making it up?" "I never said that." "You don't. They have to say it." "I can see it in your face." Emma finally looked at him. "You think I'm some hysterical teenage girl who imagined seeing herself?" "I saw her too. I talked to her." "Then why are you acting like it didn't happen?" Mark didn't have a good answer. Because it was easier to doubt his own eyes than accept what they'd shown him. Because doppelgangers didn't exist outside of horror movies and urban legends. "Tell me exactly what you remember," he said instead. Emma wrapped her arms around herself. "I looked up from my food and saw myself across the room. At first I thought it was a mirror or something. But she was moving independently. Serving tables. I watched her for maybe 2 minutes before I grabbed your arm." "What else?" "She had the scar on her chin. The one from when I fell off my bike when I was 7. "How could a stranger have that same scar in the same exact spot?" Mark felt cold despite the warm Caribbean air. Emma was right. Coincidences like that didn't happen. "And the clothes, the purple butterfly top. I packed it myself. It's in my suitcase right now." Emma's voice cracked. "Unless it isn't." They went back to the cabin immediately. Emma dug through her suitcase with shaking hands. T-shirts and shorts flew everywhere. The purple top was gone. Sarah woke up to find them sitting on the floor surrounded by Emma's scattered clothes. "What is going on?" she asked groggily. "The shirt," Emma whispered. "The one she was wearing. It's not in my suitcase." Sarah rubbed her eyes. "Maybe you forgot to pack it. Or maybe it's in the laundry bag." They searched everywhere. Under the beds, in the tiny closet, in the bathroom. The purple butterfly top was nowhere to be found. "This is insane," Sarah said. "Shirt's done to just disappear." But it had disappeared, just like the girl who'd been wearing it. Mark barely slept the rest of the night. When morning came, he was already dressed and ready to investigate. The ship's crew quarters were off limits to passengers. But Mark had spent years working construction jobs where he wasn't supposed to be. He knew how to blend in, how to look like he belonged. He took the service elevator to deck 2. The corridors down here were different. No cheerful decorations, just white walls and fluorescent lights. It smelled like industrial cleaner and something else, something organic and unpleasant. Mark tried several doors before finding one that was unlocked. Inside was a small office with filing cabinets lining the walls. Employee records, maybe. He rifled through the files until he found what he was looking for. Personnel records for dining room staff. Photos attached to each file. His hands shook as he flipped through them. Maria Santos, age 23. James Chen, age 19. Rebecca Williams, age 25. No one who looked like Emma. Carlos had been telling the truth. Mark was about to give up when he found a file folder wedged behind the others. The tab was unmarked. Inside was a single sheet of paper with no photo attached. The name at the top made his blood freeze. Emma Hartley, age 17. Hired 2 days ago. That was impossible. Emma Hartley was his daughter. She'd been with them the entire cruise. She'd never applied for a job on the ship. But there it was in black and white. Emergency contact. Mark Hartley. Father. Home address. 1247 Oak Street, Columbus, Ohio. Emma's exact address. Mark heard footsteps in the hallway. He shoved the file back where he found it and slipped out of the office. He made it to the elevator just as a security guard rounded the corner. The man looked right at him but didn't. He stopped. Maybe Mark really did belong here. Maybe everyone on this ship was exactly where they were supposed to be. Except his daughter. His real daughter. Mark found Sarah and Emma at breakfast. They were sitting at the same table as yesterday. Emma was pushing scrambled eggs around her plate without eating. Any luck? Sarah asked quietly. Mark sat down heavily. We need to get off this ship. What? Emma looked up sharply. Dad, what did you find? It doesn't matter. We're leaving at the next port. We can't just leave, Sarah protested. This cruise cost us $3,000. And Emma has been looking forward to it for months. I don't care about the money. Mark lowered his voice. Something is very wrong here. I found employment records with Emma's name on them. Her real name. Our real address. Emma went pale. That is impossible. I know it. It's impossible. But I saw it with my own eyes. They spent the rest of breakfast in tense silence. Other passengers chatted and laughed around them, oblivious to the nightmare unfolding at table 15. Mark kept scanning the dining room, looking for the other Emma. She never appeared. After breakfast, they went to guest services to inquire about disembarking early. The woman behind the counter was polite but firm. They could leave the ship at the next port, but they wouldn't receive any refund. And the next port wasn't until tomorrow afternoon. One more night. Mark could handle one more night. They spent the day by the pool, trying to act normal. Emma wore sunglasses and kept her head down. She jumped every time someone walked past. Mark didn't blame her. He felt like they were being watched too. Crew members seemed to appear wherever they went. Always smiling, always helpful, always asking if there was anything they needed. That evening, they ate dinner in their cabin. Room service brought sandwiches and chips. Nothing fancy. Mark just wanted to avoid the dining room. But around 9 o'clock, Emma announced she was going to get ice from the machine down the hall. I won't go with you, Mark said immediately. Dad, it's 20 feet away. I think I can manage. Against his better judgment, he let her go alone. Sarah was in the shower. The ice machine was practically outside their door. What could happen? Emma didn't come back. After 10 minutes, Mark went looking for her. The hallway was empty. The ice machine hummed quietly, completely full. He checked the elevator lobby, the deck above and below, the gift shop, the arcade. Nowhere. Sarah emerged from the bathroom to find him pacing their small cabin like a caged animal. Where? Emma. I don't know. She went to get ice and never came back. They searched the ship together. Every public area, every restaurant and lounge. Mark even convinced a janitor to let him check the service areas. No sign of Emma anywhere. At midnight, they reported her missing to ship security. The head of security was a no-nonsense woman named Janet Rodriguez. She took their report seriously and immediately organized a search. But Mark could see it in her eyes. She thought Emma had simply wandered off. Maybe met some boy. Maybe lost track of time. She didn't understand that Emma would never disappear without telling them. Emma was responsible, careful. She always checked in. The search continued through the night. Crew members combed every inch of the ship. They even searched the lifeboats and maintenance areas. Dawn broke gray and choppy over the Caribbean. Emma was still missing. We need to consider all possibilities, Janet said gently. Sometimes passengers become disoriented on ships. The motion can affect people differently than they expect. You think she fell overboard? Sarah said flatly. I am not saying that, but we have to be thorough. Mark felt like screaming. She didn't fall overboard. Someone took her. Sir, this is a secure environment. All crew members are thoroughly vetted, and passengers don't just kidnap each other. What about the girl who looked like Emma? Have you found her? Janet consulted her notes. They reviewed security footage from yesterday's dinner service. We don't see anyone matching the description you provided. That is impossible. We all saw her. Sometimes the mind can play tricks, especially when we re-stressed or tired. Mark wanted to grab Janet by the shoulders and shake her. Instead, he forced himself to stay calm. Show me the footage. Janet led them to the security office. Banks of monitors showed feeds from cameras throughout the ship. She pulled up the dining room footage from yesterday evening. There was their table. There was Mark getting up and walking across the room. The timestamp showed 7:23 p.m., but the screen where the other Emma should have been was empty. Mark watched himself talking to thin air. This is wrong, he said. The footage has been tampered with. Sir, these systems are completely secure. No one has access except authorized personnel. Mark stared at the screen in disbelief. According to the video, he'd gotten up from dinner and had a conversation with nobody. He looked crazy, unhinged, but he knew what he'd seen. They all knew what they'd seen. The ship docked in Cozumel at 2 p.m. Mark and Sarah stood on the pier watching passengers stream off for their shore excursions. Happy families with their cameras and sunscreen, living their normal lives while Mark's world collapsed around him. Emma was gone. The ship's security team had no leads. The local police were sympathetic but explained they had no jurisdiction over what happened in international waters. Mark called the FBI from a payphone on the dock. They took his report and promised to investigate, but he could hear the skepticism in the agent's voice. A missing person case with no evidence. No witnesses except the family. Security footage that contradicted their story. Sarah sat on a bench nearby, crying quietly. She aged 10 years overnight. We have to get back on the ship, she said when he finished the call. What if Emma comes back? What if she is looking for us? Mark knew Emma wasn't coming back. At least not the Emma they knew. But they reboarded anyway. Their cabin felt like a tomb without Emma's presence. Her clothes were still scattered on the floor from when they searched for the purple top. That evening, Mark couldn't bring himself to go to dinner. The thought of sitting in that dining room made him sick. Sarah ordered room service again. They ate in silence, picking at their food. Around 9 p.m., someone knocked on their door. Mark opened it to find a young woman in a white uniform. She was holding a towel and fresh linens. Housekeeping, she said brightly. It was Emma, his Emma, but not his Emma. The same face, the same voice, but something fundamental was different. The way she held herself, the expression in her eyes. We already had housekeeping today, Mark managed. Oh, I'm so sorry. Must be a mix-up with the schedule. She smiled. Emma smiled. I'll come back tomorrow. She turned to leave, and Mark saw it, the purple butterfly top peeking out from under her white uniform jacket. Wait, she stopped but didn't turn around. Emma, Mark's voice cracked. Emma, is that you? The girl in the hallway went very still. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then she looked back over her shoulder. Her face was exactly right. Every freckle in the right place. But her eyes were empty. Hollow. I'm sorry, sir. I think you have me confused with someone else. She walked away down the corridor. Mark watched until she disappeared around the corner. Sarah appeared beside him in the doorway. Who was that? Nobody, Mark said quietly. Nobody at all. They sailed back to Miami in a fog of grief and confusion. The FBI met them at the port, but there wasn't much they could do. A 17-year-old girl had vanished from a cruise ship with no evidence of foul play. It happened sometimes. Not often, but sometimes. The agent who interviewed them was kind but clinical. He explained that maritime law was complicated. The ship flew under a foreign flag. The incident happened in international waters. It could take months to sort out jurisdiction. Mark and Sarah drove home to Columbus in silence. Emma's car was still in the driveway. Her soccer cleats were still by the front door. Her room was exactly as she left it. Posters of her favorite bands on the walls. College brochures scattered across her desk. A half-finished essay for her English class. Sarah spent hours going through Emma's things, looking for clues. Some sign of what had happened. But teenagers didn't leave evidence of supernatural encounters in their bedrooms. Mark went back to work. Concrete and steel were still reliable. Still made sense. He threw himself into construction projects, working 12-hour days to avoid thinking about his daughter. But late at night, when he couldn't sleep, he researched doppelgangers online. Urban legends about doubles who appeared to steal people's lives. Stories that went back centuries. Most of it was nonsense, folk tales and superstition, but some of the accounts were disturbingly specific. People who encountered exact copies of themselves or their loved ones. The doubles were always slightly wrong. Empty, like poorly made copies of the original. and the people who encountered them often disappeared soon after. Mark found a forum for families of missing persons, parents and siblings and spouses who had lost someone under mysterious circumstances. He created an account and posted Emma's story. The responses were mostly sympathetic but unhelpful. People shared their own tragedies, offered resources and support groups. But one message made Mark's blood run cold. It was from a woman named Patricia Chen. Her 22-year-old son David had vanished from a cruise ship 6 months earlier. Royal Caribbean, not the same line Emma had been on, but the circumstances were almost identical. David had pointed out someone who looked exactly like him working in the ship's restaurant. When his family investigated, the crew denied employing anyone matching his description. David disappeared that same night. Security footage showed nothing, no evidence of foul play. Patricia had done her own research. She found 17 similar cases over the past 5 years. Always cruise ships, always young people between the ages of 16 and 25. Always someone who looked exactly like the victim working somewhere on the ship just before they vanished. Mark stared at his computer screen until his eyes burned. 17 cases, 17 families destroyed. He printed out Patricia's message and all the case details she included. Then he called the FBI agent who handled Emma's case. Agent Martinez was patient but skeptical. "Mr. Hartley, I understand you, grasping for answers. But these kinds of patterns can seem meaningful when you looking for them. Correlation ISN, causation. 17 people, Mark said. All cruise ships, all the same circumstances. Maritime disappearances happen more often than you think. These ships carry thousands of passengers. Sometimes people fall overboard. Sometimes they have mental health crises. Sometimes they choose to disappear. Emma didn't choose anything. She was taken. I am not dismissing your concerns, but we need evidence, real evidence, not conspiracy theories from internet forums." Mark hung up feeling more alone than ever. The FBI wouldn't help. The cruise line stonewalled every inquiry. The local police had no jurisdiction, but he wasn't giving up. Emma was out there somewhere, or something wearing her face was out there. He booked passage on another cruise. Same route Emma had taken. Same cruise line. Sarah begged him not to go. "What if you disappear too? What if I lose both of you? I need to know what happened to her. She is gone. Mark, our Emma is gone." Going on another cruise wanted to bring her back. But Mark was already packing. He brought construction tools before. This time he was bringing a camera, recording equipment, anything that might capture evidence. The majesty of the seas looked exactly the same as before. Same cheerful decorations, same smiling crew members, same cramped cabins and crowded dining rooms. Mark requested the same table they sat at before. He spent every meal scanning the servers, looking for familiar faces. On the third night, he found what he was looking for. A young man who looked exactly like David Chen was bussing tables near the buffet. Mark recognized him from the photos Patricia had sent. Same angular face, same thick black hair, same nervous habit of adjusting his glasses. Mark followed him into the kitchen. The staff area was bustling with activity. No one paid attention to one more person in casual clothes. The David doppelganger was loading dirty dishes into an industrial dishwasher. His movements were mechanical, precise, like a robot following programming. "David?" Mark said quietly. The young man looked up. David's eyes stared back at him. But they were empty, hollow. "I'm sorry. Do I know you? Your mother is looking for you." Patricia Chen. She's been worried sick. Something flickered behind those empty eyes. Confusion. Maybe recognition. "I don't know anyone by that name. You disappeared from a Royal Caribbean cruise 6 months ago. Your family has been searching for you." The David thing tilted its head. "I think you have me confused with someone else. They worked on this ship for 2 years. No, you haven't. You're not even supposed to exist." Mark pulled out his phone and showed him Patricia's message. Photos of the real David. News articles about his disappearance. The doppelganger stared at the screen. Its face went completely blank. Then it smiled. David's smile, but wrong. "You should go back to your cabin now," it said. "The kitchen is off limits to passengers." What happened to the real David? Where is he? "I am the real David." But it said the words like reciting lines from a script. No emotion, no conviction. Mark backed away slowly. The thing wearing David's face watched him go with those dead eyes. He spent the rest of the cruise documenting everything. Taking pictures, recording conversations, building a case that no one would believe. When he got home, Patricia was waiting for him. She'd driven up from Houston after he called her. "You saw him?" she asked desperately. "I saw something that looked like him. Mark showed her the photos and videos he'd taken. Patricia broke down crying when she saw her son, his face. But in the recordings, the doppelganger looked wrong. The images were blurry. The audio was distorted. Nothing that would convince a skeptical FBI agent. It's like they can be properly documented, Patricia said. Other people I've talked to have the same problem. Cameras malfunction. Recordings get corrupted. What are they? I don't know. But they retaking our children, replacing them with these empty copies. Mark spent the next year investigating. He connected with other families, shared information, built a network of people who lost someone to the cruise ship phenomenon. They called themselves the bereaved, parents and siblings and spouses united by loss and determination. The pattern was always the same. Young person points out their exact double working on a cruise ship. Crew denies employing anyone matching that description. Security footage shows nothing. The original person vanishes. The doppelganger remains. But Mark learned something else, something that made his blood run cold. The doppelgangers didn't stay on the ships forever. After a few months, they disappeared too, gone without a trace. And then new ones appeared. Different faces, different names, but the same empty eyes. Mark was checking his email on a rainy Tuesday morning when he saw it. A message from someone calling themselves Emma 2847. The subject line said, "I remember you, Daddy." Mark, his hand shook as he opened it. "I'm not allowed to contact you. They watch us very closely. But I found a way to send this message. I remember who I used to be. I remember you and Mom and our house on Oak Street. I remember my room and my soccer cleats and the essay I never finished for English class. But I can come home. They want to let me. I'm different now. Empty. But I remember loving you. I think that means something. Don't look for me anymore, Daddy. I'm not your Emma. But I remember being her. That has to be enough." The message was sent from an anonymous email account that bounced back when Mark tried to reply. He stared at the screen until his vision blurred. Sarah found him there hours later, still sitting at his computer. "What is it?" she asked. Mark showed her the message. Sarah read it twice before speaking. "Is it really her? I don't know. What do we do?" Mark closed the laptop. Outside, rain pattered against the windows. Somewhere out there, things wearing stolen faces were living stolen lives. And his daughter, or something that remembered being his daughter, was trapped among them. "We do what she asked," he said finally. "We stop looking. I can do that. Neither can I, but maybe that's the point." Mark never went on another cruise. But sometimes, late at night, he wondered if Emma was still out there. Still remembering. Still trying to find her way back to being human. And sometimes he wondered if the thing that had taken her place was learning to be more than just an empty copy. The questions kept him awake. But the answers, he suspected, were worse than not knowing. In the darkness of his bedroom, Mark listened to Sarah breathe beside him and tried not to think about hollow eyes and stolen faces. Outside, the wind picked up. It sounded almost like voices calling from very far away. Almost like someone calling his name. Story 10. Lock Suite. The smell hit Tony Martinez like a punch to the gut. Security Chief Martinez had investigated plenty of disturbing situations during his 15 years on cruise ships. Medical emergencies, theft, domestic disputes, but nothing had prepared him for the stench seeping from Suite 1247. The odor was wrong, not the usual suspects of spoiled food or overflowing toilets. This smell carried something deeper, something that made his teeth ache and his skin crawl. The complaint came from passengers in neighboring suites 3 hours ago. A smell so bad it was making people sick. Kids were vomiting. Adults were demanding room changes. Tony checked the passenger manifest. Suite 1247 was registered to Robert Kellerman from Des Moines. Single occupancy. Paid in full for a 7-day Caribbean cruise. Boarded in Miami 6 days ago. But nobody had seen Kellerman since embarkation. The electronic door lock showed no activity since Kellerman first entered his suite. No exits. No room service visits. No housekeeping access. The privacy lock had been engaged from inside for the entire voyage. Tony knocked on the door. "Mr. Kellerman, this is ship security. We need to check on your welfare." No response. Just that terrible smell getting stronger. The master key override took 30 seconds to process. Tony held his breath as the door clicked open. The smell rushed out like a living thing, forcing him back into the corridor. His radio crackled with Captain Morgan's voice. "Security Chief, what is the status on Deck 12? Tony covered his mouth with his shirt sleeve and peered into the suite. What he saw made no sense at all. "Captain, we have a problem. The suite was completely empty. Not just of people, of everything. The furniture remained bolted to the floor as required by maritime safety regulations. Bed, chairs, dresser, television stand. But every personal item was gone. No luggage, no clothes, no toiletries, no sign anyone had ever lived in this space. Tony entered the suite carefully. His security training kicked in despite the overwhelming stench. Check every corner, look for evidence, document everything. The bed was made with military precision. Hospital corners so tight you could bounce quarters off the covers. No indentations suggesting anyone had ever slept there. The closet stood empty except for extra pillows and blankets still wrapped in plastic. The dresser drawers contained nothing but the usual hotel amenities. Soap, shampoo, sewing kit, all unopened. The smell was stronger near the bathroom. Tony approached the doorway with growing dread. The bathroom looked normal at first glance. Clean white tile, fresh towels folded perfectly, everything in its proper place. Except for the sink, the basin was filled to the rim with dark water that stank like low tide at a polluted harbor. Floating in the water were long strands of what looked like human hair. Brown hair, lots of it, enough hair to fill a barbershop floor. Tony photographed everything with his phone before touching anything. This was evidence of something. He just had no idea what. The water in the sink was ice cold and thick with salt. Like seawater that had been sitting stagnant for months. The hair felt real when Tony lifted a strand with a pen. Human hair that had been underwater for a very long time. But Robert Kellerman had been on the ship for 6 days. Where did seawater come from in a bathroom sink? Where did all this hair originate? More importantly, where was Robert Kellerman? Tony sealed the suite and radioed Captain Morgan for a private meeting. This situation was beyond standard security protocols. They needed to involve maritime law enforcement. Captain Morgan met Tony in the security office 30 minutes later. A 20-year veteran of cruise operations who had seen every possible passenger incident. "Show me what you found," the captain said grimly. Tony pulled up the photos on his computer. The empty suite, the mysterious salt water, the mass of human hair floating like seaweed. Captain Morgan studied the images in silence. His expression grew more troubled with each photograph. "Have you located Mr. Kellerman?" the captain asked. "No, sir. No passenger with that name has used their cruise card anywhere on the ship since boarding. No restaurant visits, no bar purchases, no casino activity, nothing." The captain pulled up Kellerman, this booking information. Credit card payment processed normally. Background check cleared. No criminal history or red flags. "Did anyone actually see him board?" the captain asked. Tony checked the embarkation records. Security cameras showed a middle-aged man in a baseball cap and sunglasses presenting Kellerman as identification. But the image quality was too poor to make a positive identification. The person who boarded could have been anyone, Tony realized. "We only verify the ID documents, not the person carrying them." The captain nodded grimly. False identity boarding was rare but not impossible. Someone could have stolen Kellerman's booking information and used it to access the ship. But that raised even more disturbing questions. What happened to the real Robert Kellerman? Why would someone need to hide their identity for a cruise vacation? "Captain, there is something else," Tony said. "The smell in that suite. It is not coming from the salt water or hair. It is something else, something worse." The captain had smelled it too when they opened the suite. A stench that seemed to bypass the nose and attack directly through the nervous system. The smell of something that had been dead for a very long time. "We need to search the entire ship," the captain decided. "If someone is hiding aboard using false identification, they could be anywhere." Tony organized search teams to check every public area, crew quarter, and storage space. 200 crew members looking for one missing passenger who might not even exist. But the search revealed something unexpected. Other passengers reported seeing Robert Kellerman during the cruise. A man matching his description had been spotted in various locations around the ship. The casino security manager remembered him. Middle-aged guy, quiet, always wore a baseball cap. Lost about $300 playing blackjack on the second night. A bartender in the pool deck lounge also recalled serving him. Drank whiskey neat, good tipper. Said he was from Iowa. Seemed lonely. The ship's photographer had even taken his picture during a formal dinner event. A clear photograph of Robert Kellerman smiling at the camera while seated alone at a table for two. But the photograph raised more questions than it answered. The man in the picture looked exactly like the identification photo from Kellerman's driver's license. Same face, same features, same distinguishing marks. But something was wrong with his eyes. They were completely black. Not just the pupils. The entire visible portion of both eyes was solid black like pools of oil. This could be a camera malfunction, the captain suggested. Digital photos sometimes have technical problems. But Tony had seen enough crime scene evidence to recognize when something was genuinely disturbing. The eyes in that photograph were not a technical error. They were the eyes of something pretending to be human. The investigation took on new urgency. If something inhuman was aboard the ship disguising itself as Robert Kellerman, every passenger and crew member was potentially in danger. Tony reviewed additional security footage from the past 6 days. He found dozens of images of Kellerman throughout the ship. Always alone, always wearing the same clothes, always with those terrible black eyes that cameras captured even when human witnesses did not notice. The footage showed Kellerman visiting every deck of the ship over the course of 6 days. But he never returned to Suite 1247 after the first night. Where had he been staying? More disturbing was his behavior in the security videos. Kellerman moved differently than normal passengers. His walking pattern was too smooth, too fluid, like he was gliding rather than walking. And he never blinked. Not once in hours of security footage. Tony assembled a detailed timeline of Kellerman's activities. The pattern that emerged was methodical and predatory. Day 1. Kellerman explored the ship layout, visiting every public area and memorizing exit routes. Day 2. He began following other passengers, always staying at a distance, but tracking their movements throughout the ship. Day 3. He started approaching solo travelers in isolated areas. Brief conversations that security cameras could not record due to audio limitations. Day 4. 3 passengers who had spoken with Kellerman reported feeling ill and requested medical attention. Day 5. The same 3 passengers disappeared from the ship's tracking systems. Their cruise cards stopped registering any activity. Day 6. Kellerman was last seen entering the lower deck storage areas where passengers were not allowed. Today was Day 7, the day the smell started seeping from Suite 1247. Tony realized they were not dealing with a missing passenger case. They were dealing with a predator who had been hunting aboard their ship for nearly a week. "Captain, we need to find those 3 missing passengers immediately," Tony said. "I think Kellerman has been collecting people." The captain ordered an emergency passenger count. Every person aboard the ship needed to be physically located and verified as safe. The process took 4 hours. When it was complete, the results confirmed Tony's worst fears. 17 passengers were unaccounted for, not just missing from activities, but completely gone from the ship's tracking systems. Their cruise cards had stopped registering any activity over the past 6 days. All 17 had been solo travelers. All had been captured on security cameras speaking with Robert Kellerman before they disappeared. "This is impossible," the captain said. 17 people cannot just vanish from a cruise ship. Where are the bodies? Where is the evidence? Tony had a theory he did not want to voice. But the evidence was pointing toward a conclusion too horrible to accept. The salt water in Suite 1247, the mass of human hair, the smell of decay that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Kellerman was not hiding the bodies. He was dissolving them. "Captain, I need to check the ship's water systems," Tony said. Specifically the ballast tanks and drainage systems. The engineering crew provided access to the ship's lower levels where water processing equipment operated continuously. Tony brought portable testing equipment and waterproof cameras. What he found in the ballast tanks would haunt him forever. The water was thick with organic material, bits of clothing, jewelry, personal items, and human remains in various stages of decomposition. 17 passengers had been murdered and disposed of in the ship's own water systems. Their bodies dissolved in salt water and pumped through the vessel's circulation network. The smell permeating Suite 1247 was coming from the ship itself. The entire vessel had become a floating tomb contaminated with the remains of murdered passengers. Tony documented everything with his cameras while fighting the urge to vomit. This was evidence of the most horrific crime he had ever encountered. But one question remained unanswered. Where was Robert Kellerman now? The security footage from the past 24 hours showed him entering the ballast tank area but never leaving. He had gone into the ship's depths and simply vanished. Tony searched every inch of the lower decks. Storage rooms, mechanical spaces, crew quarters. No sign of Kellerman anywhere. It was as if he had dissolved into the ship's water systems along with his victims. The Coast Guard boarded the vessel when it reached the next port. Federal investigators took control of the crime scene. The ship was quarantined while forensic teams processed evidence. The official investigation concluded that Robert Kellerman had committed 17 murders before taking his own life somewhere in the ocean. His body was never recovered. The cruise line paid settlements to victim families and implemented new security procedures. The ship was completely decontaminated before returning to service 6 months later. But Tony Martinez never sailed again. He took a job as a mall security guard in Orlando. Solid ground under his feet. No water anywhere near his workplace. The nightmare stopped after 2 years. But Tony still could not drink tap water without thinking about what might be dissolved in it. The ship returned to regular cruise schedules with a new name and fresh paint. Passengers enjoyed their vacations without knowing about the horrors that had occurred in the same cabins they now occupied. But sometimes crew members reported strange incidents. Passengers disappearing for hours before turning up confused and disoriented. Unexplained mechanical problems with the water systems. Surveillance cameras malfunctioning in specific areas of the ship. And occasionally, security guards noticed a passenger who moved too smoothly through the corridors. Who never seemed to blink. Whose eyes appeared completely black in certain lighting conditions. The cruise line always investigated these reports thoroughly, but they never found anything conclusive. Just coincidences and technical malfunctions that had reasonable explanations. After all, Robert Kellerman was dead. The case was officially closed. There was no reason to believe the threat still existed. But in Suite 1247, now renumbered as 1249, guests sometimes complained about a faint smell coming from the bathroom. Maintenance crews would check the plumbing and find nothing wrong. The water always ran clear and clean. But if you knew what to look for, you might notice it tasted slightly of salt. And late at night, when the ship was quiet and most passengers were asleep, security cameras sometimes captured movement in the corridors. A figure gliding smoothly through shadows, always just out of focus. The figure of a middle-aged man in a baseball cap, methodically exploring the ship and memorizing the location of every passenger who traveled alone. Robert Kellerman was gone, but something had taken his place. Something that understood how to hunt in the confined space of a cruise ship. Something that had learned patience from watching human predators operate. The ship sailed on through calm seas, carrying its cargo of unsuspecting passengers toward destinations they might never reach. And in the depths of the ballast tanks, the water waited with infinite patience for the next solo traveler who would speak to a friendly stranger with impossibly black eyes. The hunt would begin again soon.